ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतङ्गमय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। Let us offer our salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God Incarnate. Let us pray to Him to lead us from the unreal to the real, to lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. Today's topic, Yoga preached by Lord Krishna. There are various methods to reach God, to realize God. Yoga is also one of the method by which one can realize God, can realize his true identity with God. So, Lord Krishna has taught us yoga in Bhagavad Gita. We can pursue the path of yoga to experience real happiness and peace in life. The word yoga comes from a Sanskrit root, yuj, which means to join. In its spiritual sense, it is the process by which the identity of the individual soul and the Supreme Soul is realized by the yogi. The human soul is brought into conscious communion with the divine reality. Just as camphor melts and becomes one with fire, just as a drop of water, when it is thrown into the ocean, becomes one with the ocean. The individual soul, when it is purified, when it is freed from lust, greed, hatred and egoism, when it becomes pure sattvic, then it becomes one with the Supreme Soul. The science that teaches the way of acquiring this special spiritual knowledge is called Yoga Shastra. In fact, that is the spiritual knowledge which everyone should aspire for. It is through that knowledge one could get into the abode of real peace and happiness. No doubt everybody is aspiring for knowledge, but spiritual knowledge is what is important, not any other knowledge. Generally, people go after secular knowledge, that is non-spiritual knowledge. So, that knowledge will never give happiness, will never solve the problem of life. You will never know the mystery of life and death. It is only through spiritual knowledge you could realize the truth. Yoga, in a generic sense, it refers to karma yoga, that is, doing work as an offering to God, becoming more selfless in the process. It's a process by which you would be purified by all the impurities of the mind. And there is bhakti yoga, which is path of devotion. Everybody has that element of love. So, bhakti yoga means the path of love. How you should divert your love towards God and how one should pursue this path. It's all given in the Bhakti Yoga. Then comes Raja Yoga, the yoga of meditation, concentration. Then Jnana Yoga, this intellectual pursuit. Then there is yoga which is practiced generally by people, Hatha Yoga, Mantra Yoga, Laya Yoga or Kundalini Yoga. In a restricted sense, it means the Ashtanga Yoga or Raja Yoga of Patanjali Maharshi only. The word yoga is also applicable in a secondary sense to all those factors and practices that are conducive to the final yoga preached by Lord Krishna. Achievement or fulfillment of yoga, and as such indirectly lead to final freedom or perfection. Similarly, though the one who has reached the final asampragya samadhi or union with reality is called a yogi, one who is attempting to get perfection in yoga is also called a yogi. Yoga philosophy is one of the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy. Unlike so many other philosophies of the world, it is a philosophy that is wholly practical. Yoga is an exact science based on certain immutable laws of nature. It is well known to the people of all countries of the world interested in the study of Eastern religion and culture, and is held in awe and reverence as it contains in it the master key to unlock the realms of peace, bliss, mystery and spiritual power. Even the philosophers of the West found solace and peace in this divine science. The founder of the yoga philosophy, Patanjali Maharshi, is said to have lived about 300 years before Jesus Christ. He was not only a philosopher and a yogi, but a physician as well, a doctor. Yoga is that state of absolute peace, wherein there is neither imagination nor thought. Yoga is control of mind and its modifications. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. It is said in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Yoga teaches us how to control the modifications of the mind and attain liberation. It teaches us how to transmute the unregenerate nature and attain the state of divinity. It is a complete suppression of the tendency of the mind to transform itself into objects, thoughts, etc. Yoga kills all sorts of pain, misery and tribulation. It gives you freedom from the round of births and deaths, with its concomitant evils of disease, old age and so on, and bestow upon you all the divine powers and final liberation through super intuitional knowledge. Equanimity is yoga. Serenity is yoga. Skill in actions is yoga. Anything by which the best and the highest in life can be attained is also called yoga. Yoga is thus all embracing, all inclusive and universal in its application, leading to all round development of body, mind and soul. Yoga is primarily a way of life, not something which is divorced from life. Yoga is not forsaking of action, but is efficient performance in the right spirit. Yoga is not running away from home and human habitation, but a process of molding one's attitude to home and society with a new understanding. Yoga is not a turning away from life, it is spiritualization of life. That's very important. Spiritualizing your life, wherever you are. That means yoga is for all. It is universal. It is not a sectarian affair. It is a way to God and it is not a creed. The practice of yoga is not opposed to any religion or any sacred church. It is purely spiritual and universal. It does not contradict anyone's sincere faith. Yoga is not a religion, but an aid to the practice of the basic spiritual truths in all religions. Yoga can be practiced by everyone and anyone. To be a yogi means to abide continuously in God and to live at peace with people. Yoga is union with God. It is union with all, realizing God dwells in all. Moral purity and spiritual aspiration are the first steps in the path of yoga. For any spiritual practice, these are basic qualities which are essential for anybody practicing spirituality. One who has a calm mind, who has faith in the words of his Guru and the sacred scriptures, who is moderate in eating and sleeping, and who has intense longing for deliverance from the samsara chakra, is a qualified person for the practice of yoga. An aspirant in the path of yoga should have faith, energy, cheerfulness, courage, patience, perseverance, sincerity, purity, lack of despondency of mind, dispassion and aspiration. Concentration, serenity, self-restraint, truthfulness, non-violence, non-covetousness. All these things are very important to be practiced by a person who wants to become a yogi. An austere and simple life is indispensable for yoga. So the foundation of yoga is self-control. Discipline is the essence of yoga. Discipline of the body as well as discipline of the mind. In the practice of yoga, there is a reversal of the normal outgoing activity of the mind. Steadiness of mind is very essential for a reversal of the normal outgoing activity of the mind. Unless the mind is first made steady and brought under complete control, it will not be possible to change its course to the opposite direction. So one should remember all these things. Life today is full of stress and strain, of tension and nervous irritability, of passion and hurry. If a person puts into practice a few of the elementary principles of yoga, he would be far better equipped to cope with his complex existence. Yoga brings in perfection, peace and lasting happiness. You can have calmness of mind at all times by the practice of yoga. You can have restful sleep. You can have increased energy, vigor, vitality, longevity, and high standard of health. You can turn out efficient work within a short span of time. You can have success in every walk of life. Yoga will infuse in you new strength, confidence, and self-reliance. The body and mind will be at your beck and call. Yoga brings your emotions under control. It increases your power of concentration at work. Yoga discipline gives poise and tranquility and miraculously rebuilds one's life. The yoga way of life deepens man's understanding and enables him to know God and his relationship with him. Yoga leads from ignorance to wisdom, from weakness to strength, from disharmony to harmony, from hatred to love, from want to fullness, from limitation to infinitude, from diversity to unity, and from imperfection to perfection. Yoga gives hope to the sad and forlorn, strength to the weak, health to the sick, and wisdom to the ignorant. Through yoga discipline, mind, body, and the organ of speech work together harmoniously. For a yoga practitioner, a new outlook, a new health, a new awareness, and a new philosophy rush in and vividly transform his life. Lust for power, material greed, sensual excitement, selfishness, passion for wealth, and lower appetites have drawn man from his true life in the spirit into the materialistic life. He can regain his lost divine glory if he practices in right earnest the principles of yoga. Yoga transmutes animal nature into divine nature and raises him to the pinnacle of divine glory and splendor. Gita is a veritable divine Kalpataru, the bestower of everything to everyone according to his particular need. One of the great triad, Prasthanatraya, that is Brahma Sutras, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. These three constitute Prasthanatraya. Shankaracharya has given commentaries for all these three. To all the votaries of Hindu culture, Gita remains the quintessence of all the highest flights of the Vedantic, Upanishadic investigations and conclusions. This wonderful scripture is all this and something vastly more precious and significant to the countless seekers after divine perfection all over the world. For Gita by its own admission, is the supreme scripture on yoga sadhana, practice of yoga or the practical process of ascent into divine illumination. It is a yoga shastra par excellence. Every chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is replete with invaluable pointers to the practice of yoga sadhana. They throw much light upon the path of yoga. It embodies a glorious exposition of the yogic way of life, and its presentation is integral and all-comprehensive. No aspect of yoga is left untouched. Attainment of yoga, or union with the divine, is the main theme of the Gita as expressed by the stirring admonition of the Lord. Anityam asukam lokam imam prapya bhajasvamam. Lord Krishna says, having obtained birth in this mortal world that is fleeting and full of sorrow, O man, be intent on worshipping me. And again in his categorical imperative, Lord Krishna says, Tasmat yogi bhava Arjuna. Be thou a yogi, O Arjun. Be a yogi. These inspiring injunctions are followed up by lucid exposition of all the different aspects and stages of yoga in its various phases, the basic preparations, the preliminary hurdles to overcome, the first stages, the progress and later ascent are all touched upon in different places in the body of this 18-chaptered scripture. O you seeker after God, seeker after yoga, says the Lord, first of all you must shake off all faint-heartedness and fear and make a firm resolve to fight this arduous battle with the flesh, the subtle senses, and the elusive and deceptive mind. The life is really a great battle. You must make vairagya, dispassion, and abhyasa, spiritual practice, your two mainstays in this process. At the very outset, give up ruthlessly the three greatest enemies on the path, namely, Trividham Narakasya Idam, that is Kama, Krodha, Tatha, Lobha, Tasmat Etat Trayan Tyajet. Triple is the gate of this hell, destructive of the self-lust, anger and greed. Therefore one should abandon these three. From verse 55 to 71 in chapter 2 were given the model of the ideal yoga siddhi to be kept before us constantly for emulation. The 14th and 16th chapters serve to give us an invaluable pattern of the life sattvic, which is the sine qua non for fruition of the yoga. The Gunatri Vibhaga, the yoga of the division of the three gunas, and the Dvaivasa Sampad Vibhaga, the yoga of the division between the divine and demonical, give us this light on yoga. The Jnana Marga, the path of knowledge, is dwelt upon in the 4th and the 7th chapters. The gospel of selfless action, Nishkam Karma, is inspiringly expounded in the 3rd chapter. Yoga of meditation is explained in the 6th chapter, while the 12th chapter contains one of the most glorious presentations of the cult of pure devotion or love, also called Prema Marga. The concluding portion of this sublime chapter, the last 8 verses, form an immortal piece by themselves, giving a shining picture of the yogic way of life and yogic ideal. This is the Amritastakam, 8 verses of the nectar. In addition to these expositions of the broad paths of yoga, yoga sadhana,
A number of other unique yogic techniques are beautifully brought to light. Chapter 6 warns us against extremes and counsels moderation. Here we have an enunciation of the golden medium as the inner secret of success in the practice of yoga. The 9th chapter reveals the secret of the path of perfect surrender or Sharanagati Yoga. Verse 27 in the same chapter gives in a nutshell the technique of Arpana Yoga, or the constant offering up of all your life processes and activities unto the Lord. Chapter 10 and 11, by revealing the form universal, initiate the jiva, individual soul, or the embodied being, into the sublime mysteries of Virat Bhavan. And the Namaskara Yoga, which is later expounded once again by the Blessed Lord to Uddhava in the 11th skanda of the Srimad Bhagavad Purana. Thus throughout this wonderful song celestial, a flood of light is thrown upon the path of yoga. In this aspect, the Gita is practical, it's powerful and peerless guide of Yoga Siddhi. Let us remember at the conclusion the yogic dictum of the Gita, Manmana bhava machitto matparo ma manusmara madhyaji man namaskuru. Fix thy mind on me, be devoted to me, sacrifice to me, bow down to me. Lord has clearly given the method how we should proceed in spiritual life. In order to reach Him, in order to get into the abode of heavenly peace and bliss. The definitions of yoga as given in the Gita have universal application irrespective of time and place. In order to understand yoga as defined in the various senses in the Gita, it is necessary and desirable for a man who seeks liberation to know how yoga has been defined elsewhere, what purpose does yoga serve, and if it can be practiced by every normal man. Etymologically, yoga means yoke. Etymologically also, as also literally, it means union, as I said earlier. Yuj means to unite. According to Patanjali, as I said earlier, it is Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Let us start with yoga as yoke, an instrument to connect oxen to the plough. In a crude but comprehensive way, it brings out the underlying idea of breaking in or training of undisciplined, unregulated and uninstructed souls. Basically, yoga is the union of the individual self with the higher self or God. This point deserves to be considered carefully. The words identity and union are used so loosely that they need a little clarification. The term identity is used in many senses. In traditional logic, it is expressed in the formula A is A. This is known as the law of identity. This formulation, in our opinion, is ambiguous because of the various possible meanings. If A is A, means the subject is identical with the predicate, it then becomes a redundant assertion, and if it makes no assertion, it is no judgment. So we may suggest that A is A becomes a real proposition if it is interpreted not as bare identity but as identity in difference, which is expressed A is both A and not A. In other words, A is both identical and different from A. It is identical in so far as both terms are the same, that is, A, and it asserts difference in so far as one A is the subject and the other A is the predicate. Likewise, the finite self is both identical and different from the infinite. It is identical in the sense that it is potentially divine and infinite. It is also different from the infinite because it is not thereby merged, absorbed, or annihilated in the infinite. Now, the meaning of the word union is also not free from ambiguity. In one sense, we may mean by union of A with B that they cease to be distinct beings. When we say that there is union of two rivers, it means there is only one river. In another sense again, it may mean that when we say that there is union of X with Y, then they do not become identical with each other, but only closely associated with each other. They do not cause to be two distinct individuals. They do not cease to be two distinct individuals. To illustrate this, we cannot do better than refer to great Christian mystic of the 14th century. He said, as the air is penetrated by the brightness and heat of the sun, and iron is penetrated by fire, so that it works through fire, the works of fire, since it burns and shines like fire, yet each of these keeps its own nature. For the fire does not become iron, and iron does not become fire. There is here a great distinction, for the creature never becomes God, nor does God ever become the creature. Obviously, identity in difference is expressed here. Insofar as iron has been dissolved in the fire and has ceased to exist itself, it is identical with fire, but the hot iron does not become fire because iron is iron. So it is different. Similarly, inasmuch as a mystic, or for the matter of that, a yogin has been united with the infinite and has ceased to exist as a separate individual, he is identical with the infinite. But inasmuch as he still feels that he, like Rama, Shama and others, experiences peace, still retains his independent status and is distinct from the infinite. Finite and infinite are not existentially identical. From the above it is clear that practically there is very little difference between identity and union. We, however, feel inclined to use the term union in connection with the yoga in the sense of identity in difference. The relation between the finite and the infinite, we mean the relation of identity in difference. Yogic union is the transfiguration or total transformation of the mystic's personality, and in the state of transfiguration, what is annihilated is the egoity or the sense of separateness, and not the person himself. He is not sunk. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, Lord Krishna has stated, Samam Pashyan hi sarvatra, samavasthitam ishwaram, nahinasthyatmanatmanam, tato yati parang gatim. Because he who sees the same Lord dwelling equally everywhere does not destroy the self by the self, he goes to the highest goal. As he sees the Lord present equally everywhere, he does not kill his true self by the self, and therefore attains to the supreme goal. It is therefore wrong to maintain that a mystic who has to attain the highest state and shares his all with all other beings has thereby lost his personality and becomes less of a person than another who has built a wall round his individuality. The higher state, the yogic state, may fitly be called the state of mystic cosmism. Mystic cosmism. It therefore follows that in the context of the yoga of the Gita, the term union has a special meaning, and that meaning is the realization of each is their all and all is each. which is possible through the practice of samatva. And in a state of union, the sadhaka's personality remains intact. Yet in the Gita, the word yoga appears to have been used in many senses, which may seem to be unconnected with one another. It may not, however, be quite impossible to discover relations among them. In chapter 2, verse number 50, it is said, Buddhi yukto jahatiha ubhe sukata dushkrate tasmad yogaya yujyasva yogaha karmasu kaushalam. Endowed with wisdom, evenness of mind, one casts off in this life both good and evil deeds. Endowed with wisdom, one casts off in this life both good and evil deeds. Therefore, devote thyself to yoga. Yoga is skill in action. Actions which are of a binding nature lose that nature when performed with equanimity of mind. Yoga is skill in action. Yogastaha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. Perform action, Arjun, being steadfast in yoga, abandoning attachment and balanced in success and failure. Evenness of mind is called yoga. Equilibrium is called yoga. Again in chapter 6, Lord Krishna says, Yam sanyasamiti prahur yogam tam viddi pandava. Nahya sanyasa sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. O Arjun, what is called renunciation? Know that to be identical with yoga or discipline of selfless action. For whoever has not abandoned subtle hankerings and self-centered objectives can never become a yogi or a practitioner of spiritual communion through works. The point is that abandonment of self-centered values is a common discipline to be observed by both the renunciate and the yogi. Mere abandonment of all actions externally will take one nowhere. For self-centeredness remains unless it is eliminated by some means. It is true too that much involvement in unnecessary works done without any discrimination or reflection will only increase desires and further strengthen self-centeredness. But discharge of one's swadharma as an offering to God and eliminating self-centeredness, in so discharging it through practice of discrimination and devotion, will gradually make one rise above self-centeredness. Again Lord Krishna says, Tam vidya dukkha samyoga viyogam yoga sangitam sanishchayena yoktavyo yogo nirvinna chetasa. Let that be known by the name of yoga, the severance from union with pain. This yoga should be practiced with determination and with an undesponding mind. The questions that immediately arise are whether the definitions given in the Gita are consistent with other definitions. Is each definition exclusive of the other? If they mean one and the same thing, why there should be so many definitions? The confusion and difficulty are susceptible of being removed if we add up one more definition. Yoga is a means by which Godhead is realized. In this view of the matter, it is quite plain that Godhead can be realized in diverse ways. If that be so, then it is neither confusing nor difficult to understand that each definition lays stress on some particular mode of yoga. Each definition will be found in the light of this exposition to possess a special significance, and in the end we shall be led to see that yoga, when applied to or practiced in accordance with a particular system, acquires a new meaning or definition. The yoga of the bhakta is different. So it will be seen that be it bhakti, jnana, laya, mantra or any other system, yoga forms an essential basis and means of realization of the goal. But in combination with each, it puts on a different complexion and means something different. As we go on now dealing separately with the four definitions given in the Gita, we shall eventually see not only the distinction between the different systems, but also the synthesis of yoga. In the course of our investigation, a discovery will be made that all forms of yoga have different places and purposes in the scheme of evolution of man, and the definition are neither inconsistent with one another nor exclusive of one another. At once we are up against the most vital question as to what is the aim and purpose of human existence in the evolutionary scheme of creation. Every right-thinking person has emphasized emancipation to be the aim and the purpose of our life. And the escape, achievement, liberation or realization, whichever term is used, can be brought about by yoga alone. If this view is accepted, then the second question posed in the beginning is answered, namely that yoga not only serves as a purpose, but that the ultimate and supreme purpose of human life is not served except by yoga, whatever the form of yoga may be. The third question is, it can be practiced by every normal man. Whether it can be practiced, along with the several definitions of yoga. Lord Krishna has said, Samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshyostu priyaha ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya mayite teshu chapyaham. The same am I to all beings. To me there is none hateful or dear, but those who worship me with devotion are in me, and I am also in them. That is, God cannot be partial to anybody. This is the answer to the question. Is God then partial towards his devotees as against those who do not adore him? Among worldly men of high positions, such an individual's attitude is common. Invidious attitude. Those who flatter them are rewarded, and those who do not do so are excluded from favor. Is God also like that? This criticism is answered here. Those who adore him approach close to him and dwell in him, and therefore participate in his blissful nature, whereas the others ignorantly or deliberately exclude themselves from him and become exclusively interested in worldly life with its inevitable consequences. The Bhagavad Puran illustrates this point by describing God as Kalpataru Swabhavaha, comparable to the wish-yielding tree of heaven. Those who go under the tree and pray are answered. Those who exclude themselves from it fail to get those blessings due to their own fault. A question may now arise, is God then simply a passive element, just like beauties in nature? Is he not responsive to the devotee's attitude? Does not the devotee get any active help from him? Sri Ramakrishna answers this, declaring that if the devotee takes 2 steps towards God, God takes 10 steps towards the devotee. A devotee will find from experience that God's grace works on him in 100 ways without his actually knowing it. If he is everything and everything has to be find its fulfillment in becoming one with him, then it must be assumed that liberation or realization is a birthright of every Jivatman, individual being. It is accelerated or retarded or impeded by the application or non-application or improper or imperfect application of the means. That is yoga. Many definitions only go to show that there are many means or methods available to man for his final deliverance or moksha, and that a particular means or method alone is required to be used according to a particular system. Thus it is obvious that the different definitions simply point out different methods or means to achieve the same end. As we said earlier, yogaha karmasu kaushalam of the Gita lays stress on the karma kaushalata, that is skill and action, as a means of attainment of the final end. Samatvani yoga uchyate. is not an emphasis on the equilibrium of mind alone, as many may be prone to think. It strikes a balance and harmony between body, mind and soul. For an all-round improvement and development, all parts must be coordinated and correlated, and every part of man must be catered or cared for. All the three must be properly tuned up. A little reflection will convince us that all these four definitions of yoga given in the Bhagavad Gita are not incompatible with one another, nor even with the other definitions. The art of performing one's duties, that is the art of keeping oneself detached and disinterested from all desires for the fruits of actions, is possible only when one has cultivated the ideal of samatvam. The moment one perceives God in all things and all things in God, yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvancha mai pashyati, one is in touch with God. A mystic or yogi, he always looks on all as one. Panditaha samadarshinaha. They see all not in process of becoming, but in being. Each being contains within itself the whole intelligible world, and also beholds its complete in each particular being. There all is everywhere. Each is there all, and all is each. It is this perception or direct realization of the samatva that leads to the true union of the individual self with the higher self, God, which is the goal of every yoga. From this we may say that mysticism is the belief in unity in all things. Bertrand Russell rightly observes in his Mysticism and the Logic, he says, one of the most convincing aspects of the mystic illumination, that karma kaushalata is impossible unless and until unperturbed ideal of equanimity, the samatvan, has been reached. Just as a man minus body or mind or soul is unthinkable and impossible, it is likewise impossible and unthinkable that he can be liberated in the metaphysical sense without his body, mind and soul being properly regulated, trained, nourished and developed. Neglect of the psychic culture of man is as much injurious to his growth and emancipation as the neglect of mind culture. Similarly, soul needs its own nourishment, instruction and escape. That's what we understand by integral or integrated yoga, yoga yukta atma. Having gone so far, it becomes easy to see how important and essential the use of yoke assured is for our improvement and advancement. Yoke is restraint or curb upon our bodily and mental acts. Purity of word, deed and thought is a prerequisite to spiritual upliftment. Bhagavad Gita lifts us up to a very high region of thought and action and tells us that worldly duties do not constitute a hindrance or an impediment to our spiritual rise and emancipation. On the contrary, if selflessly performed, they lead to our progress and deliverance. Every karma, though it may seem to lead one to pravritti marga, has the liberating effect if it is nishkama karma. So, the emphasis is upon nishkama. Let us not take shelter under this supreme sacred teaching by deceiving ourselves into the belief that personal or family gain is not excluded. Anything that smacks of swartha, any act which amounts to self-aggrandizement, in fact, any act not performed in a detached, disinterested manner, with cleanest of motives for the good of others, will not be nishkama karma. The bedrock of the teaching is paropakara, doing good to others. Who can be found equal to the task? Only a yogin, with a properly trained soul. But a word of caution is necessary here. We must not jump to the erroneous conclusion that to work for family or personal advancement is ruled out. Every duty towards every member of the family and oneself must be done, and done equally well as for others. But let not the sordid motive of unlawful gain or greed be the guiding principle of our life. Means and motive must be pure and honest. Means and motive must be pure and honest. Arjun's mind was confused as to duty. Confusion as to one's duty and responsibility is caused by ignorance or imperfect application of the true nature of dharma. Each karma is not dharma, but every dharma is karma. So, Arjun was instructed in dharma. Dharma has this world as its field of operation. So, worldly duties have to be done well. Final victory of the body and mind, as well as the victory of the virtue over vice, and the final liberation of the soul from travail and bondages are thus assured. Arjun did nothing for self-glorification, for self-advancement or selfish ends. He had already established his reputation as a foremost warrior. He had already defeated many warriors in previous engagements. He did not occupy the throne. He did only what he was told. Nashto mohaha smritir labdha tvat prasadan mayachyuta sitosmi gatasandehaha karishye vachanan tava. Arjuna said, O Lord, my delusion has been dispelled and my memory restored by your grace. I now stand firm with all my doubts cleared, ready to execute your command. Arjuna said this to Lord Krishna after hearing the Bhagavad Gita. The substance of the Gita Yoga is self-surrender to the divine will. A person is not ready for self-surrender unless and until he has become a yogin. That is, until he has destroyed his ego. Surrender implies freedom. It is not the subservience of a servant or a slave to the will of his master or tyrant. Surrender of soul to the will of God must be in freedom and love. It must be a spontaneous act. The last question as to whether it can be practiced by every normal man must be answered emphatically in the affirmative. The different definitions according to different systems should have made it quite clear by now, especially in the light of the discussion and elucidation of some of the points involved, that to suit a particular type of man, a particular mode or method has been advocated. All of us are not constitutionally or temperamentally the same. Our inclinations and aptitudes are different. Our mode of approach is conditioned by all these natural factors. For these reasons, and also for the overriding consideration that God can be reached by any and everyone who has a yearning for Him, there are many means, that is, different varieties of yoga available to us. One can practice that which suits one, but none can do without yoga. Yoga is indispensable to a mumukshu, that is, one who seeks moksha, one who seeks atyantika mukti, final liberation, the state of permanent bliss and peace. Now, we should like to drive home the truth that yoga is not so much a system of thought or a mode of physical exercise as a way of living. It is not a change of dress or dietary that raises man, though it automatically comes about in due course of time by constant practice of a particular kind of living. It is the inner change that matters. Yoga aims at a complete transformation of the psychic man. The modern people, however, have luckily begun to realize There are new heaven and a new earth promised by these critics, were worse, at least no better, than what were our own. The revelation, as also the realization, have, fortunately for us, set a new healthy tone, and what was at one time a voiceless dissatisfaction against costly, colorful ritualism was sharply reflected later on in the teachings of the modern sages, savants, and saints. Scriptural teachings in their pristine purity then began to be inculcated in all their seriousness. It is generally recognized now that serving the country, nation, properly construed and understood, is a form of worship no less glorious than Deva Seva in an empty form. Daridra Seva is no less a beautiful form of worship of Annapurna. Founding of universities, colleges, and imparting of scientific and other kinds of useful knowledge are the first charge upon our conscience, and this is in truth Sharana Saraswati Puja. Yoga preached by the Lord was practiced by Arjuna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra as well as in the battlefield of life. Kurukshetra symbolizes the battlefield of the gunas. The 100 Kaurava brothers with their forces signify the Rajasika and the Tamasika qualities in their different forms. Pandavas signify the Sattva Guna, full of love, purity, virtue, truth and charity. The world is an eternal Kurukshetra. Not a single moment passes without fight. The gunas are the armies arrayed one against the other in this vast battlefield of nature. Our body is the chariot driven by the Lord. The jiva must surrender itself to the Supreme and live and act in Him. It is time we should also start practicing in all sincerity the same yoga. We have many a battle still to fight. The conscience of mankind must be quickened to break up the plan of the powers of evil. It was Jesus Christ who said, "Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away." It was He again who said, "For all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword." Aggressors are bound to perish if they persist in their evil career. Mankind is crying for safety, solace and salvation, that righteousness may prevail. So, Lord Krishna has given specific, clear instructions to be followed by anybody seeking liberation. It is possible for everyone. What is needed is gearing up all our resources and practice earnestly for realizing the truth. What is that is obstructing in our path is our own samskaras. They have become stumbling blocks in our path. All these samskaras of the mind must be cleared off. The channel must be clean and pure. Then you will be able to reach the truth and enjoy the beauty and experience heavenly peace and bliss. With these words, I conclude my talk. Thank you very much. Another special event we are having in Ganges Children's Camp, August 4th to 11th. It is our annual children camp, which will be held in Ganges, Michigan. For this also, you can take registration forms for your children for this program. Om Sahana Vavato Sahano Bhunakto
सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरि Om Tat Sat. May the Lord protect us. May He nourish us. May our knowledge be fruitful and enlightened. May we not hate each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.